In this video, we'll look at contributing ingredients to the fragility of identity. Identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Fragility, the ease with which that pattern can be shattered or interrupted. So the first principle is scale. So when you have a small object, a pinball, for example, in relationship to a large object, a bowling ball, you have fragility because the pinball has very little impact on the trajectory of the bowling ball. But the bowling ball has all of the trajectory, all of the impact on the pinball. When they touch each other in tension, at any point, it is the pinball that goes flying and the bowling ball continues. So what does this mean in psychological terms? Well, if a very poor person bumps up against a neighborhood of rich people in a collision, it is, in a capitalist paradigm, the poor person that goes tumbling, not the wealthy neighborhood. When a racial minority has a clash with the racial majority, it is the lives, the patterns of the minority that is changed more, right? This is the law of mass. Now, it's also the basis for trauma in most cases. Trauma leading to PTSD is a collision between an identity, a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, and a larger energy in a collision that shatters the identity. If the identity is larger than the object that is encountered, there's no trauma, right? If I make this movement, this is an identity, it's a pattern, right? I'm the one doing this pattern, that's the I, and I'm owning it, and this is the identity, the pattern, right? It's a pattern of doing, right? It's a way of being, right? There's a tone and a presence as I'm doing that. There's a thought that says, for whatever reason, this is a good pattern, a good activity, a good thing to do. There's a feeling around that. If I'm telling myself this is the best thing to do, I probably feel, okay or good about it. If I tell myself this is a dumb thing to be doing, I'm probably feeling foolish. But there's a pattern. Now, if this pattern runs into an ant, the ant is squished or just falls off my hand, there's no trauma for me. There's trauma for the ant, right? But if I'm doing this and punch into a truck that's driving towards me, and my knuckles are broken, and then I'm knocked over shortly after contact with the fist because the truck is not deterred by the fist. If I'm punching a lion, the lion just takes a bite, right? Then it's me that is traumatized. So it's about scale. When two patterns of energy collide, it is the smaller, the less dense, the more fragile that shatters, that changes, as the larger pattern continues on its original trajectory. Now, the next variable in fragility is sensitivity. Now, sensitivity correlates with responsiveness, right? So if we have a sunburn on this shoulder, than just touching it like that. Just putting this shirt on. If I have severe burns on this shoulder, just putting a shirt on, moving even an inch, is unbearably painful. Now, because it's unbearably painful, I'm more reactive to the contact. Don't touch that. Get away from me. You might come towards me and touch that. Hey, stay over there, right? I've got a burn. Don't touch me, right? So I'm mentally, emotionally more reactive, more responsive. In reference to higher physical sensation, right? So, and the more pain I'm in, if somebody does something that dishonors the sensitivity, the more worried I am, right? So this is a very important principle to understand with, quote, control freaks or paranoid people. That's not coming out of nowhere, right? What it's saying is there's a sensitivity beneath that. Could be a psychological sensitivity, the pain of immense shame, the pain of immense terror, the pain of loneliness, the pain of the thought, I'm not good enough. Well, if that is the greatest pain, that is the greatest sensitivity. And if that's the greatest sensitivity, then anything that gets near that statement, I'm not good enough, I'm wrong, I deserve to be punished, I've got this incredible pain in my shoulder. Anything that gets near that pain, the immunity of the identity, the immune system of the identity is going to protect against that. How dare you say that I'm not good enough? Get out of here, this, that, the other, right? A waiter walks by without offering to put some water in the glass, right? But if I'm really, really, really sensitive to the idea that I'm not worthy or I'm not important, hey, waiter, get over here. How dare you deliver that message in the most sensitive area? Get over here and fill up my water. Hey, hop to it, right? Because you're touching on my sensitivity, right? There's a message in there and it's incredibly painful. And you're just, too self-centered to be paying attention and too self-absorbed to be paying attention to me. But the way I hear it is, you don't think I'm important enough. And so I've got to get to work. Where's the manager, this and that and the other? And what I'm going to get is everyone's going to be paying more attention to me. And that's medicine. That's medicine on that sunburn. So the more sensitive we are in either a given area or in all areas, the more reactive we are to our environment. And the more reactive we are, the more sensitive we are, the more we can experience pleasure or pain, right? So sensitivity goes both ways equally, right? An insensitive person can feel a little bit of pleasure and a little bit of pain. A highly sensitive person can feel a lot of pleasure and a lot of pain. Now, the innate drive in every human being is always the same. I, you, and everyone else who has ever lived wants to feel sustainably better and wants to avoid feeling chronically worse. I don't want to feel bad. And I definitely don't want to feel really, really, really bad for a long and or indefinite period of time. I don't want that. And I do want to feel good. And I want to feel as good as I possibly can for the longest possible time. I want to feel really good. I don't want to feel bad. Now, a sensitive person can go either way. And it depends on the environment, right? Someone who is sensitive to their environment is dependent on that environment for either sensations of well-being or sensations of pain. Right? If you slap me on the back there and I've got sunburn, I'm in excruciating pain. If you blow on it and fan some peacock feathers and put a little bit of very, very delicate aloe vera, there's ecstasy, there's release, right? So a sensitive person, first of all, is more reactive. Now, because an identity is a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, reactivity interrupts the pattern, right? Here I am, and then you touched my shoulder lightly, and I lost my train of thought. I came to the present. I said, who's doing that? Stop that, right? So the pattern is interrupted. So the identity is more fragile the more we react to our environment. And a sensitive, either a highly sensitive person in the brain physiology is referenced by Elaine Aron, as in the book, The Highly Sensitive Person, or in a local sensitivity, as in sunburn, as in third-degree burns of oil pouring on the skin, or if an arrow is poking in to your chest and someone pushes you from behind, right? You're far more reactive than if you're not sensitized to this point by this arrow point, right? So the more sensitive we are, the more reactive we are. The more sensitive and the more reactive we are, the more the environment around us determines how much pleasure and how much pain we're in. The more other people and or variables in the environment determine how much pleasure and how much pain we're in, the more we want to control those variables. Right? If you can cause me a lot of pleasure and a lot of pain, I want to have influence. I want to control you in such a way that I can guarantee that you will deliver, that you will behave in the way that causes me a lot of pleasure and not behave in the way that causes me a lot of pain, right? Because it's linking to my core drive. The fundamental drive of evolution is pleasure and pain. I want to feel sustainably better. I want to avoid feeling chronically worse, and I will do whatever that takes. So in an environment where you affect my pleasure and pain, I will do what it takes to gain influence over you so that you will do the thing that brings me pleasure. But in order to gain influence, in order to control you, I've got to modulate my identity, right? Oh, you don't like loud noises? I won't say a thing. I'll be very quiet. As long as you agree to do the thing that doesn't cause me a lot of pain and that brings me a lot of pleasure. You want money? Here, let me give you a lot of money. As long as you decide to do the thing that doesn't cause me a lot of pain and brings me a lot of pleasure. So sensitivity correlates to reactivity, correlates to the desire and need to control, correlates to modulating identity, patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, in order to control. Now, empathy is another variable. Meaning, what empathy means is that if you're in pain, I feel pain. And if you're happy, I feel happy. That's what empathy means. Empathy is the ability, is the choice, is the willingness to feel what the other person's feeling. Which means we are now reacting. We are affected more by what the other person is feeling. You see, a sociopath has a tremendous amount of freedom in a certain sense because the other person can scream and I don't care. The other person can commit suicide and I don't care. I want what I want and I don't care about anyone else. But an empath does care about everyone around them. And so if you're angry at Sue and Sue's angry at you and you don't resolve that, then I feel the anger, Sue's anger, I feel your anger, and it doesn't resolve and it feels terrible. And it's like, please, can you resolve this so that I can feel better? What do I have to do in order to resolve this so that I can feel better? An empath, which is a form of sensitivity, is more affected by the state of other people and thus more motivated to ensure the well-being of other people. Right? And so the identity is more fragile because it's more dynamic, it can change, right? You're in tremendous pain because I'm smoking. I had no idea, I'll stop smoking, right? Well, the identity of the smoker has dissolved because you have empathy and the other person is upset. Or you don't like my music, I'll turn it off. The sociopath says, you don't want my music, that's tough. You want me to stop smoking? Go fuck yourself. It's my body. I'll do what I want. Go fuck yourself. In fact, I'm not even going to worry about that. Do whatever you want. I'm doing what I want, right? The sociopath can tune out all reactivity. The sociopath can block the feelings of other people. There's no connection. And so there's more staying power. The identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being is more consistent. The next area is the amount of chaos in the environment. The identity is the I that identifies with a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being for the purpose of successfully engaging with reality, right? So I know that there's gravity, and so I know this won't be moving around, right? But at a certain point of chaos in the environment, it's not clear whether being nice to a stranger, for example, let's say there's a virus going around. If there's a virus going around and half of the people in the world have it and half of them don't, and you meet a stranger, and your habit, your identity, is to say, please have a cup of tea, sir, and shake their hand. Why? Because you've been doing this for many years, right? But now there's a 50% chance that if you shake this person's hand, you'll catch the virus and you'll die, right? So there's chaos, there's uncertainty, right? And there's change, death, disease, change. So I'm now weakening my identity. I'm doubting my identity in the face of evidence. So-and-so shook someone's hand and now they're dead. That other person shook someone's hand and now they're dead. Now my identity is of stoicism, right? I don't let little things bother me. Life goes on, take it or leave it. All things come to an end. That has been my pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. But I don't want to shake your hand. I'm changing that identity because I'm afraid of death. I'm afraid of change. So I'm changing in response to the environment. And the more volatile the environment is, and the more that environment delivers pleasure and pain in a mixed signal, right? This is the trouble children have when they have addicts for parents. They do good homework one day and they're wonderful. They do good homework the next day and they get slapped, they get ridiculed, they get shamed, right? Because one day the parent was drunk and the next day they're sober. It changes, right? And so the child doesn't know, should I present my homework or not, right? Because the environment is changing. So the identity changes, right? I need a schizophrenic personal identity in order to relate to the schizophrenic reality. Now, this also, because the identity, the habit of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, is a vehicle. It's a form of autopilot that is based on past experience. It's formed in order to survive chronic ecological phenomena. That's why it was built. That's why it's a pattern. That pattern worked more than other patterns available at the time. Right? So if the outer environment is volatile and uncertain, if the future is uncertain, then the identity is uncertain, because what's core is the desire to survive, the desire to feel secure in that survival, the need to survive, the need for security, the need for love and belonging, the need for self-esteem. But the environment that we're in determines how successful a given identity is, right? If you're in a group of very trustworthy people all the time and you tell them the truth, good things will happen. But if half of the time, half of the people are sociopathic, then half of the time you tell the truth, you'll be harmed, and half of the time you tell the truth, good things will happen, right? So the level of integrity in the outer environment, right? You can think of mom and dad saying, lying is bad. It's not what Jesus says. It's not what Muhammad says, whatever, this is the way to do it. And then you see mom carrying a condom, right? And she and dad don't use condoms. And you ask about it, and they say, don't tell anyone, right? So you've got a mixed message now. Tell the truth, don't tell the truth. Now, when, right? When do you tell the truth? When don't you tell the truth? Well, you tell the truth when I tell you to tell the truth, and you don't tell the truth when I tell you not to tell the truth. That's the obvious thing to do. But now you've got two identities. You've got an identity, a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that says tell the truth because Jesus and this and that. And then you've got the other pattern of not telling the truth because mom is scowling. Don't tell the truth when I scowl at you when you're about to say something. And why is that, right? Well, we're not going to talk about that. Just don't go there. So now you've got two identities. One can be talked about, one can't be talked about. And that helps you survive and be secure in an environment that lacks integrity. So your pattern lacks integrity. I always go right except when I'm going left. That's not a very strong pattern, right? So the pattern is weak when it's broken, when it's fragmented into polarities. It's a weaker pattern. So it's kind of like a rope. You know, when you've got integration, when you have integrity, the rope is braided. But if you take the same rope and you undo the braids and you divide the rope and do half of them this way and half of them that way, first of all, they tug on one another and put strain. And secondly, it's twice as easy to snap the rope because it's been divided. So when it's twice as easy to snap the rope, when it's twice as easy to break or shatter the identity, what it means is that whereas with a unified identity, a braided, integrated identity, it might require a bowling ball to break that identity. And so it's not as fragile. There's not as many objects that are big and moving around. But if you break the identity into two halves, it only needs a baseball, right? Something 3 or 4 times smaller. And there are many more of those because a bowling ball can break this identity, but so can a baseball. So can a softball. So can a, right? So now you have more objects in your reality that can break your pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Now, the more fragile the identity, the more anxiety, the more helplessness there is, right? Particularly if you're in a sociopathic environment. So if you're a sensitive, if you're an empath, if you're in chaos, and if you have been divided by multiple people in authority roles, right? The school principal says, don't tell anyone that you saw this, but don't tell lies about this. And mom says, don't tell lies about this, but tell lies about this. And dad says, don't tell lies about that, but tell lies about that. And big brother says, don't ever tell this, and don't mention that we can't ever tell this, right? But do tell this or I'll beat you up, right? So now you've split the person into 5 or 6 patterns based on variables that have nothing to do with that individual. So you have a very weak pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that has no internal logic other than I don't want to be beaten by these larger people in my life. I don't want to be humiliated. I don't want to be traumatized by these larger people in my life. And this is the chaotic, fragmented pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And unfortunately, when you have all these different people with different agendas dominating out of fear, a small child, when they come into the same room, the identities and the agendas collide and clash, right? Because mom doesn't want you to tell this area and dad wants to know that area. So what do? Older brother doesn't want you looking or mentioning this activity, but dad wants to know that activity. So what do? Right? At the dinner table, all these different things are colliding. The principal doesn't want you talking about him kissing Miss Pennifor in the back corridor, right? Because Miss Pennifor's a married woman. Miss Pennifor is an employee of the principal. This is breaking this. The principal doesn't want that mentioned, right? But the local newspaper wants the story, right? So you're now, as a small object, being pulled in various ways that there is no way out, right? There's no way to win. There's no way to make this person happy, make this person happy, make this person happy, and make this person happy, because there's a lack of competence, there's a lack of integrity in the system. So it's producing a fragmented pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. It's creating schizophrenia. Now, one of the many splits, one of the many forms of schizophrenia in a cult or culture is just that, right? If you have half a brain, you will be aware that you're pulled in this direction by Robert, you're pushed in that direction by Paul, you're put in that direction by Susie, right? There's all these different agendas, which requires the development of multiple personas to deal with these different agendas, and requires that these personas don't meet one another, right? I don't want to be in the same room with this, right? When I'm pretending as a small person to be loyal, right? Because every small person is trying to avoid trauma. The collision between a small object and a large object that the small object cannot survive. So every small person is trying to avoid a collision with large persons in their reality. But if the large persons force that, bring them into the room and say, did your coach say this or did he do that? Did he touch you here or did he touch you there, right? And you have developed multiple personalities, multiple personas in order to deal with the disintegrated, fragmented relays of energy in the cult. And they have to be separate, right? When I'm with Big Brother, I have to pretend I'm tough, and I have to pretend Big Brother's tough, and I have to pretend he's cool, and I have to do this. But when I'm complaining to Mom to get her to stop the bullying, I have to say that I'm small and he's not cool. And I can't let him see me talking to Mom. I can't let Mom see me talking to him, because the two identities, the two patterns, do not integrate. They're diametrically opposed. So I have to form these separate personalities, and there's tremendous stress and crisis if they come together. The whole cult explodes if the truth comes out. And literally, we're living in that reality. We are living in a reality where if the press knew what was happening in every home, every minute of the day, in every person's life, every minute of the day, the entire cult would melt down, right? Because there's a gap in the cult between the face that the cult presents and the underlying reality, right? And that gap is filled with lies, with deceptions of various forms, right? So all the people you think of as your heroes are no longer your heroes if you see everything going on in their lives at every moment of every day, right? So the reason they're heroes is based on lies. It's based on omitting things that would take them off the pedestal of heroes. And the villains, all the villains, see, this is the cult structure. All the villains in the world are only villains because you didn't watch every moment of their life since birth. If you watched every moment of their life since birth, you would be heartbroken by the cruelty, by the messages, by the patterns that have been given to them by the heroes. You'd be heartbroken by the apathy, by the lack of intelligence, by the incompetence of the entire cult that caused and allowed those protocols. So there'd be no more villains, right? If you really understood the science you would see that every single thing done in your cult is flawed, deeply flawed. Meaning this and this and this does not suggest that this is the single best action. The only reason it appears that way is there's a lack of information. There's a whole pocket of information that's being obscured. And if you saw that information, it would stop making sense, right? So the cult is maintained by hiding 30 to 70% of the data, stopping it becoming aggregate, right? Oh, that's an anecdote, that's an anecdote, that's an anecdote, that's an anecdote, right? But what if it turns out that 74% of people have participated in sexual abuse on the giving or receiving side? Suddenly, you have to look at the cult. Well, if you don't want 75% of the next generation to participate in sexual abuse, what are you going to do about it? But if you can say that's an anecdote, that's an anecdote, that's an anecdote, well, you don't have to do anything, right? You just say, well, that's an anecdote. Of course, some people, right? And you can maintain the status quo. You maintain the cult identity, pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, right? So if you can just hide certain things from view, keep them isolated and separate so that you don't know what was going on over there, right? Right. That's how you maintain the status quo. Now, here you have, right, the disintegrity about the disintegrity, right? Because when schizophrenia becomes too extreme, meaning when a sensitive person is exposed to an environment that is too schizophrenic, and they are completely loyal to that environment, so this part of them blocks off what this part of them knows, so that they can play the various roles demanded of them. This will be our little secret. Don't tell mom, don't tell dad, right? When they actually compartmentalize themselves as a direct mirror of the disintegrated environment, they become a schizophrenic. And then somebody notices at some point, that part of you isn't at all like that part of you. And you say, what? No, whoever you're talking to says, no, that's not me, I never did that. In a direct mirror of the people, you became schizophrenic to accommodate, right? Mom said, I saw you smiling to that woman. And dad says, no, I never did that. No, that was the complete nonsense. But I saw that, no, that never happened either, right? When that level of denial and insanity is internalized, and then you say, you were rude yesterday. You say, no, I wasn't. I'm the polite one, and I was never rude. I disown the part that I'm not at that moment. And I become completely and totally schizophrenic to accommodate the cult, which is so schizophrenic itself that it then says, we've got a problem here. You've been diagnosed as a schizophrenic, and we need to fix that. It's like, no, I became a schizophrenic to help you fix your schizophrenia, to enable your schizophrenia. You don't want me to fix this, or all the secrets of mom and dad, and no. They want the label fixed, but they want the secrets and the partitions to maintain, right? Their disintegrated state, right? So the more disintegrated the environment, and it's a pretty disintegrated environment to lay the emotional needs of 20 grown-ups on a vulnerable infant and refuse to meet their needs without partitioning the identity. And then when they express that masterfully as a completely disintegrated individual, they're then told that this is a problem when it's a masterpiece of compliance. So that's insane, right? And there are so many cases of this that do not come out until you test the laws, the dark contracts. You'll say, how are you doing? And I'll pretend to be wonderful. Why? Because the dark secret is if I tell you I'm in absolute hell and need help, you don't want to confront my abuser and you don't want to appear like a coward, but you are a coward, but you don't want to appear like a coward. So if I drift towards the truth, you drift away and I become disintegrated, abandoned and isolated, and thus unconnected. I lose regulating talent by all the people that drift away, that avoid the interaction because they don't want to see something about themselves. They don't want to see something about their cult or culture. Right? So a disintegrated, a schizophrenic self, I'm a really positive person, I have goals, I want to accomplish them, and then I go drinking. That's disintegrated. Right? Really positive, I'm excited about my goals, and then I go and work 10, 12-hour days achieving my goals ahead of schedule. That's integrated. Hey, I'm writing, yes, I'm doing the book, and I go drinking and didn't write anything. Right? That's disintegrated. Right? So the more disintegrated we are, the weaker the pattern. Right? The more fragile the pattern, the smaller the object, the easier it is to collapse it. What are some of the things that have weakened your identity? And where are areas that your identity is strong, where are areas that it's weak? What are the things that threaten to topple certain identities? Because another vulnerability or weakness in identity is a lack of routine. I do this every now and again, right? Once a year I play the violin. Well, the identity of a violin player is relatively weak, right? All you have to do is stop someone from playing the violin once a year and they no longer are a violin player. But if someone plays the violin every single day and you stop them for one day, it's a pretty strong pattern. So routine, the frequency with which the identity expresses itself and develops itself is a very important variable. And we'll leave it there for now.